to another episode of Operation Moonsucker Part 2. And yes, look at that. That is probably one of the most beautiful launches that I have ever recorded, ever since I started playing Kerbal space program. Nevertheless, what we are going to do here is, well, I realized I needed some improvements on my mining station, the rig on the surface of the moon. And yeah, the moon that you see here eclipsing the sun. Alright, main thing is that it produces fuel rather sluggishly, and I would like to improve that. And as you can see here, I brought a lot of drills. So the rig has about 6 refineries, those big ISRU units, and yeah, the drills that I have attached are probably not enough to make them run fully efficient. Okay, so the idea here is add more drills, get more ore out of the soil, and then get more fuel into the tanks, right? Okay. While we're waiting for a few maneuvers to complete, we can, of course, do something with the fuel that we have already harvested. So what you're going to see here is pretty much the same thing that you've seen in one of the previous episodes. I'm going to load up one of my tanks onto the carry hall, and then I'm going to get it up into space. So this is basically the first time that I'm going to deliver fuel from the surface of the moon to my space station, the Spine. Okay, first up I needed to put more fuel into the carry hall. This was done by just docking the rover onto the carry hall, transferring the fuel, then going back to the rig and refilling the tank. So basically, for one full fuel tank of fuel, I need 2 full fuel tanks, because the other one is needed to refuel the carry hall. So this is sort of a 2-to-1 ratio, so for every tank that I get into orbit, I need another tank to refuel my lander craft. Alright. And what you can see here is, of course, the docking maneuver needed to get the tank onto the hauler, the big freighter that is going to deliver the fuel to the Franz, my space station that is in need of refueling. And what I did here is, well, I did a little bit of parallel docking. I put the full tank onto the hauler and I put another empty tank onto the carry hall, so that, well, basically that the ground station is not depleted. And once back onto the surface, I loaded that back up onto the rig, refilled it again, and went back up into orbit. I'm going to spare you that because it's basically always the same thing, only in different camera angles. Alright, what I'm going to do now is show you how I really get things down onto the surface. First thing is I have to do a plane change, and as you can see here, the ascending node marker is right above my surface base. If I do this, then I'm fairly confident that I pass over it. And once I am around that ascending node marker, then I fully hit the throttle and reduce my velocity to kind of hover above it, and then just descend slowly to the ground until I basically hit the base, or rather not hit the base. Okay, you can see me do that right here. I have to keep adjusting my orbit because, well, my maneuvers, because of course Kerbal Space Program calculates the maneuvers nodes as if you would spend the entire energy of the maneuver in a single moment. This of course is not possible. You kind of have to guesstimate around that with a few seconds prior and past the point of the maneuver node. Okay, we're now in a parabolic trajectory, which is looking quite okay. And what I'm going to do now is trying to wait until I am close in range and adjust my target reticule. So I'm going to use the retrograde marker to steer it above the target marker. This is a trick that I've already done in my previous Moonsucker series, but here it's a bit more tricky because of course the gravity of the moon is a lot higher than that of Minmus, so you have to be quicker and you have to have bigger engines, and this of course complicates things. Okay, we are now on close approach. The ideal thing of course would be to straight descend down onto the docking port on the top of the rig, and that would look cool, wouldn't it? Well, of course, reality is always a bit more less forgiving than fantasy, so this turned out a little bit different. Let's watch. You see here where I set the docking port as my target. And then I'm going to try to get that target reticule and the retrograde marker aligned. But I'm descending a bit too quickly, and yeah, then I'm throttling up too much, and yeah, even though the docking port indicator mod is really helpful in this instance, it didn't help me at all. So yeah, basically I decided to just put that down safely, quick save, and then try again. So I was down on the ground, and then I got back up into the, well, you can't really say the air, but I ended up kind of not really putting that much power out of the engine so that I would ascend, but make the craft lighter, so to speak, so I could use the RCS to glide along the surface of my base. This is really a Kerbal strategy and would probably not work in real life, or at least not with a lot of damage to the equipment. And you can see me here shimmying around the docking port, trying to get a dock with it. Even went so far as to control the vehicle from below, but lo and behold, it worked! So then of course let's get rid of that descent stage. There you go away, I don't need you anymore. Okay, and then of course we can extend our new drills and our new solar panels, because those new drills lead a lot of power. There we go, and I also brought some radiators, because those refineries create a lot of heat. Boom! That was the descent stage. Okay, this looks a bit like a solar porcupine, and those radiators are working overtime, so I was a bit worried that something would overheat. And what do you do when you don't have enough radiators? Of course, you send more radiators. So yeah, due to my lack of intelligent planning, I had to get another vehicle up to the moon. And this was a very spectacular staging of the external solid rocket boosters. And look at that, what a beautiful sunrise which we head into. Stage separation, we're going to head out on the second stage, which is incidentally also our Mooner transfer stage. Bearing are ditched. There we go, and we got our encounter with the moon. Same thing as before, we're going to get to the moon, get into an orbit around the moon, and then of course get down onto the surface and try to dock with our base on the ground. So while we're doing that, of course we have enough time to do another milk run, so to speak. We have another full tank in the meantime, since the refinery is now running at full capacity. Basically the rig is filled to the brim, all of those fuel tanks are now full with fuel, so we are in business now. And here we go, we got another rendezvous with the spine. And once we exchanged a full for an empty tank, of course it was time to head back to the surface. And since the extension of the rig also provided a little bit more light, it was a lot easier to land there and maneuver around the thing. Now it is time to get the new radiators on board, or on the ground rather. Once again, I'm putting my ascending node above the base and then tweak around with my maneuver nodes until I get down to the base safely and almost in a vertical trajectory. Ditching the transfer stage, I don't need that anymore, and I'm now in my descent stage. Actually, this thing is a bit overpowered. The final stage is probably enough to get this thing on the ground and even onto the rig, but better safe than sorry. Okay, we are now very close, and once again I've parked over here, and I'm going to now cut the final stage, the penultimate stage rather. This here was a bit interesting because I decided to put the engines at about 0.8 or 0.9 thrust to weight ratio and use the RCS, of which I had plenty, to compensate for the descent. So as soon as that module went down, I hit the RCS and made it rise again, and this resulted in a fine docking maneuver. And once again this descent stage is going down. Boom! Alright, 3 more radiators to compensate for that excess heat. And well, those are also quite heating up. And in the end, I think I created a flux compensator. Look at that. Well, let's see what the future brings in the next episode. Until then, thanks for watching. Goodbye.